Welcome back. Outdoor dining was a lifesaver for many New York City restaurants during the pandemic, but as the city returns to normal, several restaurants no longer use their outdoor seating to serve New Yorkers, which has resulted in the increased numbers of abandoned structures. Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, Andrew Rigie, joins me to discuss the changes coming to the world of outdoor dining. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, can you first explain the wonders outdoor dining did for many New York City restaurants during and even shortly after the pandemic?
Absolutely. I mean, we all remember how just devastating the city was during the worst of the pandemic. We are social creatures. We're supposed to socialize, and we are then told to be socially distant. So in June of 2020, when outdoor dining kicked off, it allowed people to come out of their homes, out of their apartments, and actually eat, drink, and socialize and be close outdoors in a safe environment. So I really think it gave us hope as a city. And of course, it's responsible for really saving thousands and thousands of small businesses throughout the five boroughs and credited with bringing back about 100,000 jobs.
Now, as I mentioned, things slowly started to return back to what we were used to. And even myself, now that I'm thinking about it, now when I do go out to restaurants, a lot of us are sitting inside again, which means that, a lot of structures have been abandoned. Can you explain the mayor's efforts to address, what's been happening?
Yeah, something we knew as restaurants opened up, more people are comfortable dining indoors. Fewer people may be dining outdoors, especially if it's rainy or freezing or really hot out. So, we need to make sure that we have outdoor dining because people still love it and it's a wonderful program. But we also have to make sure that if a restaurant built a structure during the pandemic and they're no longer using it, or in the case of what's happened, many restaurants unfortunately have closed as a result of the pandemic. These structures have remained up and they're abandoned and they're worn down. So Mayor Adams and the city, rightfully so, are going out. They're tearing down those outdoor dining structures that have been abandoned because the restaurant unfortunately closed. And they're also going to go around and look at other structures that are abandoned, dilapidated, or really aren't used so they can tear them down and make sure that the program is being used the way that it's intended.
Now, you talked a little bit about the process, but what about those restaurants that are still open who just prefer to use indoor dining? Will the city contact them and ask them about it, or how is that process going to look like?
So right now we're kind of in limbo actually because we are still operating under the temporary emergency program, but the city is in the process of going through the legislative and then the rulemaking process to create a new permanent outdoor dining system that's more standardized, more sustainable, that'll work for the long term. So once that program is official and restaurants can apply, be approved, and then transition into it, I think a lot of the restaurants that have been participating under the emergency temporary program that aren't really using it are just going to have to remove all their stuff because that will no longer be a legit program. So essentially, people that want to continue to participate can, but there's a process for it. And those restaurants that don't want to will just have to remove what they have.
Now, is abandoned outdoor dining structures, is that a common occurrence throughout the city? And are there specific boroughs that are more affected by this?
I think it's probably proportional. We don't know the exact numbers, but based on how many outdoor dining structures there are in each borough. So they're definitely out there. Unfortunately, a lot of restaurants did shutter during the pandemic. So that's the result of a lot of them. Others really, we just need restaurateurs if they're not really using them and someone thinks or they look abandoned, they should come down. So they're definitely throughout the five boroughs, but now the city is really going to focus on going out, tearing them down. I think there is almost 25 initial structures they were taking down or have taken down already, and more to come.
Now, after seeing the success, what are some reasons store owners have for abandoning their outdoor dining setups? And you mentioned that some of them have closed down, but is it costly to have an outdoor dining setup? Is it a lot of maintenance? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
There's certainly maintenance. I think one of the challenges that we have to remember is that when outdoor dining was put out there, this was in the midst of the worst pandemic, a horrible crisis. Our local restaurateurs essentially had no money at all. They were losing everything they had. So they tried to put these outdoor dining structures up with limited to no resources, taking debt on their credit cards. So they weren't all made of like pressurized wood and other types of materials that would stand up to the elements. And no one thought back in June of 2020 that we would be here in, or would have been in June 2022, still in a pandemic. So I think the weather, winter, summer, and everything else just being out on the streets wore many of them down. So yes, the cost for upkeep can be a bit more pricey, especially when your business is struggling so much. And there hasn't always been clear and direct standards for restaurants about what they can do, what they can't do, what the aesthetics of these structures need to look like. So, I always say it's kind of tough to think about this in a permanent or current situation when we have to think or we need to tell a story about how we got here.
Now, can you explain maybe the unique experience or challenge that maybe some lower income area restaurants are facing in regards to outdoor dining? Because I know when I walk through Manhattan, they have some really, really beautiful, like intricate outdoor dining structures. And so I'm sure that they, obviously get a lot of use out of that. But, what is that experience like for maybe a lower income restaurant, let's say in the Bronx?
Yeah, so one of the great things about outdoor dining under this emergency program, it became more equitable. We have a lot more outdoor dining in the Bronx than we did pre-pandemic under the traditional sidewalk cafe program because it was cost prohibitive. And a lot of restaurants were actually zoned out of even having outdoor dining if they wanted to try to afford it. So a lot more restaurants in the Bronx, thankfully, have been able to participate. But of course, if you're a small business anywhere, if you are a struggling business, it is going to be more difficult to spend a lot of money, particularly on the roadway seating. The sidewalk, fortunately, it's tables and chairs. It's a bit less money. It's a little bit easier to keep clean, to maintain it than if you have a physical structure on the roadway. But in different neighborhoods, it's also an equity about garbage. We need to make sure the city is picking up the garbage effectively. The carters are picking up the garbage timely and effectively because people don't want to dine outdoors if the streets are dirty. We need to make sure that the streets are safe. Also depending on where the restaurant is located, the amount of, vehicle traffic going by can also impact the overall dining experience. But we've actually seen under the train Ellen areas, you never pre-pandemic could have outdoor dining, but you had it under the train now. And actually some of these were really successful. So I think it's amazing just to see what we can do when we rethink the streetscape and when we let our restaurants be creative. But certainly without a lot of resources, if you're in an area that may not be as pleasant to dine outdoors on, you probably won't have as successful outdoor dining. But restaurants have been doing a great job.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the open restaurants program that did start, during the pandemic. Is this going to be at all affected, by this new structure or this new wave of outdoor dining that's coming to New York City?
Yeah, so we are still more than 2 years later operating under the temporary emergency open restaurants program that was developed and launched in June of 2020 in response to the pandemic. Now the city council is working with the Adams administration on developing standards for a permanent outdoor dining program that'll allow you to use the sidewalk. I think if people want to think what it'll look like, if they remember before the pandemic, what sidewalk cafes look like, it'll look similar. The only thing is we want the bureaucracy, the red tape, the big expenses for small businesses to be removed. So the public won't really notice much of a difference, but the red tape for the small business owner will be cut, and that'll be really good. The roadway, which is a novel and new program, I think it's going to look a little bit more different. You're not going to have as many fully enclosed structures in the roadway. You're going to have upgraded building materials and different styles that are more standardized, more sustainable, but allow restaurants to still hopefully be able to use their likeness, their colors, their logos and everything. So it looks really nice. Put some plants out there, etc. So It's still going through the process of what it will ultimately look like, but I think something that people really can be proud of and restaurants want and people want to dine in and people feel good about them in their communities.
So you mentioned sustainability. Can you explain, what you mean by that and how can, these outdoor structures and these restaurants, achieve sustainability with their outdoor dining?
Absolutely. So, one, we need it to just be sustainable in the sense that the program can be sustained, that it works for restaurants, it works for customers, it works for workers, it works for the communities they serve. So, sustainable in that sense. But then also looking at the types of materials that are being used. Are there different types of salvage products, recycled products that can be built into what is being used in the future? We also have to look at design guidelines. Does it allow storm drain water to get by so it can go into the storm drains, and other types of building and design that, again, use sustainable products, allows the program to be successful so it is sustainable, and it also is sustainable in the sense that it works with the other types of uses, whether it's bike lanes or storm drain water and or cleaning the sidewalk, cleaning the roadway.
Now, how can people stay up to date with your organization?
You can go to our website, which is the nycalliance.org. You can also find us on every social media channel, New York City Hospitality Alliance or the NYC Alliance. You can join our newsletter on our website, and we'll keep you up to date on everything that's going on within the hospitality industry from the small business perspective.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back.